Good evening, folks. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Pastor Shane, for the opportunity to be here this week and to share with you the Middle East, to share with you a story that for many, many years the world was watching with some concern, but from a distance. I think that we all understand that it's global. We're all part of it. We need to be educated. I need to apologize for my accent. I do have a funny accent. It's English, though. You better get used to that because that's not going to change, all right? So this will be the accent for tonight and for Saturday as well. As Pastor Shane had mentioned, we live in a world of narratives, and that presents a challenge just by the definition of a narrative. Because a narrative is not the facts and not the truth, it's a story. Story that people put together for a certain agenda, a story that many people believe it to be the very truth. And this is a dangerous thing to do because this is not. There's a lot of propaganda in it, etc. And since I am old school and I'm more interested about the facts, we need to do some cleanup. We need to remove all the deception, all the disinformation, and try to stick to the facts. And maybe the most famous narrative in the world's agenda for the last who knows how many decades is the Israeli-Palestinian story. And here's the narrative. Once upon a time, in a land far away called Palestine, happy people used to live. They were simple, they were farmers, and suddenly, out of the blue, a bunch of strangers invaded the country, sent by the imperialist powers of the world to steal the land from the poor locals, Palestinians, to establish the Jewish state. You will not believe how many people around the world are following that story and take it to be the truth and nothing but the truth. We speak about ignorance. And the combination of ignorance and zeal is a devastating one. When you listen to the students in this country, all around Europe, screaming from the river to the sea, and they don't have a clue what river and what sea, that's dangerous because it shows a certain mindset, how easy it is to deceive bright people, how easy it is to manipulate nations, and not just common people like myself and maybe yourself. We speak about nation leaders. We always look at them and think they're very bright, more than others. They follow to the same trap, the same narratives, and their advisors as well. And therefore, the facts do matter, and that's what I try to do. By the way, don't trust a word that you hear from me. I'll try to be objective. I cannot be totally objective. You go and check. Everything I'm sharing with you. If you have a question, how can we check it? Take a note. You go and check it. And only after you find some misunderstandings, maybe I said something which is not right, come and ask a question. I'll be here Saturday as well. I'll be more than happy to try to correct everything that I said that was wrong, because too many people say, oh, your facts are incorrect. I said, okay, tell me what is the fact. Because most people don't care about the facts. Most people are not interested. And once again, when you're ready to rally for something and you're ready to take action for something that you know absolutely nothing about, that's where the whole thing begins to be a little dangerous. I'm not going to speak against Islam as a religion, not a theologian, but I don't have to. It's enough to see what Muslims are doing to other Muslims in behalf of their religion. For the last few decades, more than 3 million people were butchered around the world in behalf of Islam, and the world is within the Muslim world. The war goes on all the time, but it's so far away, you think that you're not connected. Unfortunately, it's part of everybody's problem. Shall I remind you 9/11? How blind we were ever since. We always thought it's something limited to the Middle East. It will never happen in our country. Well, you're wrong. It happens everywhere. And for that reason, education, at least in my opinion, is important. I'm going to use the screens behind me, and boy, there's going to be a lot of information coming up and down the screen. And you have a triple challenge tonight. Try to get used to my accent. I'm not a disciplined speaker. Try to follow the screen and try to follow what I'm saying. And if you need to choose one or the other, try to follow what I'm saying. I think it's more important with this matter. But in order to give you the story, we need to start more than a century back in the past. Because we need to understand the action and reaction. We need to understand the mindset of people from another religion. Let me submit to you the teaching history. That's easy. Everybody can teach history. How do you understand mindset? How do you understand mentality? How do you understand what is the worldview of somebody who lives in the Middle East? How does he see the world around him? The same mentality that you have in America I'll dare to say not at all. And therefore, a problem begins when we try to project our values, our behavior, our worldview, and think that everybody around the world has the same worldview. Why can't we just live peacefully together? How naive this way of thinking is. And therefore, to understand the Middle East is not enough to go and get your PhD in Harvard. If your education about the Middle East is coming from an American university, you do not know the Middle East, I'm sorry to say. Including advisors to the presidents, it's not enough to go to university to study the Middle East, because universities cannot teach you mindsets and mentality. Is simply impossible. I'll try to do a little bit of that to share that with you as we're going on. As Pastor said, we're going to go until 8:30. I'll be more than happy to answer questions if there are questions, and we'll bring that to conclusion with the war in Gaza that happens as we speak for 2 years now, because it's all part of the same story. Let me also submit to you, it's something much bigger than the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We do speak about, let's call it, non-Muslim, all right, the Muslim conflict, but it's even bigger than that. We speak about the fact that the world is being deceived by lies, and if you lie enough times, you get the attention of people, you create an alternative truth. People that support something, they will not support a lie. They are positive that they are following the truth and nothing but the truth. And add to that AI of the last few years, we are lost. We are absolutely and totally lost. How can you tell what is the truth and what's a lie? I try to do my best to try to do some cleanup in order to speak about that. Let's start with the map. And just one look at the map will tell you what is no, it's not connected. There's nothing on the screen behind me. For some reason, it shows everything on my computer is working well. So who are the geniuses there to tell me what's wrong? Somebody has to know what's going on. All right. Thank you, Ben.
Let's just try the classic trick.
There's always somebody in the house who knows what to do. Was that the on and off?
Okay.
Well.
And now present again.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for coming. I was positive that that's what you see. Well, the Galilee Academy presents. The Academy is a project that I started with a good friend of mine, a partner, Nir Nitzan. Some of you know the name, during COVID. We just didn't have anything better to do, so we started this Academy, and everything goes under that title, and that will be the topic that we're going to share. And you were looking at the blank screen the whole time when I give you my passionate speech. Well, let's start with the map, because the map is important to show you what is it that we're talking about. You know, we speak about the Zionists, the colonialists, and the racists, and those that commit apartheid, etc. You see the map in front of you shows you the map of the Arab world. All of it, these are Arab countries. You don't see Turkey, which is Muslim but not Arab. You don't see Iran, which is Muslim but not Arab. That distinction is important to understand. If you believe in Islam, you're a Muslim. Not only Arabs believe in Islam. You can be an Arab who follows Christianity. An Arab is not your religion. An Arab is a culture, and under that title you can practice any religion, from Buddhist to Jewish to Christian to Muslim. So Arab is a culture, Arab is a civilization, a language, and not a religion necessarily. It is true that most of the Muslims will be Arabs, but not the only ones. Iran, for example, nation of 95 million people, they're Muslims, not Arabs. Same with Turkey, Indonesia, half of Nigeria. In fact, most of the Muslims in the world are not Arabs. So this is just the Arab world, all right? And you see how small and tiny is Israel. How do you think they got that big? It started in the Arabian Peninsula in the 7th century. That's where Islam was created. That's colonizing, all right? That's how you become an empire, by conquering more land. The Arabs were the biggest colonizers, maybe except for the Mongols, in world history. Bigger than the Roman Empire. Today it sounds like a negative term, colonialism. That's how the world operated back in the days. So we speak about the Arab world, you see the sizes of it, and that tiny speck right here, that will be the state of Israel. So that's to give you an idea about the sizes and dimensions of the area. 3 objectives for the seminar. As I said, to try to clarify some of these terms. We speak about racism, we speak about anti-Semitism, we speak about genocide. People throw that in so lightly without thinking about what it means. Every word has a meaning. And these words are important to know and important to follow, so we'll do that as well. And also to try to give you this chronology of those events. The sources are plenty. I'm not using Israeli sources, obviously. I try to use a lot of documents, and the world is full of them, coming from institutions around the world, from the League of Nations that preceded the United Nations, from Arab countries, from libraries around the world. There was a lot of material. I have to say, it's almost like an obsession. Any idea how many books were published just to speak about the Israeli-Arab/Palestinian conflict? More than any other topic in the world for the last few decades. The world is obsessed about what's going on. When was the last time you read the research about what happens in southern Sudan? We speak about a place where thousands of people are killed every day. We speak about Muslims. Nobody cares. No universities are dedicating the budget for that. Nobody speaks about what happens over there. Nobody writes books about it. When it comes to the Jewish, let's say, Israeli-Palestinian conflict, there was a ton of information. Everybody has something to say about it. The world media is occupied just with that. Why? Human lives matter, or maybe human lives don't really matter. This is the first lesson in anti-Semitism. The world is more occupied to speak about the atrocities of the Jewish state and totally disregarding much worse atrocities that happen around the world because it's not a Jewish issue. You know what they say, no Jews, no news? Well, in a way, this will be the case here. So please keep that in mind because it's frustrating and you can hear that in my voice. Let me start by saying almost the obvious, a map of the Middle East. If you had the chance to talk to somebody from Baghdad about a century and a half ago and ask him or her a question, ma'am, sir, you live in a place called Baghdad, how do you define yourself? The answer will be, I'm an Arab, most likely a Muslim, but then you would ask, but you live in a place called Iraq, what is your nationality? He did not have a nationality because the place wasn't called Iraq about a century ago. It was part of the Ottoman Empire. There were no nations in the area. There were no countries in the area, no national agendas. The term nationality was not born yet in the Middle East. It started in Europe, by the way, and not long before that. The country we call Germany today only exists from 1866. Before that, there was no Germany. There were 300 small principalities that all spoke German until a prominent politician came to the stage, Otto von Bismarck, and united them to create Germany. So the German nation is not there for centuries, same with Italy. Until 1865, there was no Italy. So the whole world was in the making of creating nations. And that did not arrive to the Middle East, not yet. And therefore, this gentleman in Baghdad did not have a nationality. The whole idea was strange to him. Because in the Middle East, from biblical days, you live in clans, you live in tribes, and you're loyal to your tribe and your clan, and not to the nation that you don't have and you don't understand how the system is working. Now, you could ask somebody in Jerusalem the same question. Sir, ma'am, how do you define yourself? The answer will be, well, I live in Jerusalem. I can be Jewish, I can be Christian, Muslim. And then the question will be, do you have a nationality? The answer was no. I live in a province called Palestine, which is a province of the Ottoman Empire, just like Baghdad was in Mesopotamia. I don't have a nationality. I'm part of the Ottoman Empire. So those of you who thought that the national issue in the Middle East is as long as time itself, you're wrong. We speak about a new conflict, so to speak. We speak about a new problem, but it's not about nations, as I'll try to convince you in a minute. It's more about religion. That's the true nature of what we see happens in the Middle East and, in fact, in the whole world right now. Let me touch a couple of core issues that nobody is familiar with, which are very critical. Let's start with this. It takes some time for you to read that, but it's important. When you live in a Muslim area, in a Muslim country, and that's in the Quran, all right, Holy Book of Islam, everybody who's not a Muslim is considered to be a dhimmi. Now, a dhimmi, by definition, is a status given to non-Muslims in Muslim countries, which means that you are second or third class citizen that have zero rights. You are despised, discriminated, massacred, killed by the Muslims. They will let you live, but you are their slave and they are the masters. You have to understand that. That status exists until this very day. by law and constitution in many of the Arab countries. So if you happen to live in a Muslim country and you're not a Muslim, that's what you expect, all right? So for the Muslim mindset, the Jews are always their dhimmis. You understand what will happen a little later on when the Jews are coming as conquerors, as victors, as people who are more superior. They cannot understand that. For the Muslim mindset, if you're not a Muslim, you are inferior, and that's how you're supposed to be treated. Because that was the case ever since Islam was born in the 7th century. To try to change that, Islam is fighting back because you are humiliating the Muslim case if you dare to think of yourself as equal to the Muslims, especially in Muslim countries. Make no mistakes, this dhimmi position is global. When a place is taken by the Muslims, everybody else will be a dhimmi, and this is important to understand. So once you understand that, you do understand that we speak about a religious issue. For years and years, we focus on politics. Let's negotiate. Let's speak about land for peace. It's not the issue. The issue is religion. But once you speak about religion, it's a dead end. Because how do you negotiate over religious issues? Who are you to decide in behalf of your God? When it comes to religion, there's no way to solve it in any way. So to make things easier, we always said, well, it's all about politics, we'll find a solution. No, it was about religion, it is about religion, it will be about religion. The whole war of Hamas against Israel is a religious issue. They're not Palestinians. They fight for a world jihad, and listen to the voices in America as well. Listen to imams in mosques. Globalize the intifada. You think it's just a sign carried in rallies by excellent students from the university Ivy League. No, it's a call for globalizing the intifada, is a call for domination of Islam. And they carry that for a purpose. We just ignore that because we do not understand the meaning of it. The meaning is important. For the Muslim ear, that's what this is all about. And therefore, we do speak about a religious conflict and not about something political, because when it's politics, we can reason. It's just common sense. We'll go sit at the table, we'll find a solution, we'll divide the land for everybody's benefit. That's the easy solution. When it comes to religion, there is no solution. And if you listen carefully to the statements made by Arab leaders, it's always the same thing. We speak about world jihad. And therefore, what are we negotiating about when you know it's not even the possible solution, because it's not about politics. We do speak about the domination of Islam. And keep in mind, Islam is being humiliated ever since the Ottoman Empire was devastated by the Allies in WW1. Ever since, Islam did not have a single day of victory for more than a century. In fact, they had two. 9/11, and that's how they see it, was a great victory. And October 7th, 2023, when they massacred 1,200 Israelis in their beds, that was a day of victory. So we speak about a religion that feels humiliated, where their own religion speaks about victory. Think about the sense of revenge. You will not admit that you are defeated time after time. You are commanded to restore the greatness of Islam. That's what Islam is all about. So once you understand that sentiment, you begin to understand that peaceful negotiations are not really an option. Now, I'm sorry, it's not a pleasant message I'm sharing with you tonight, but it's enough of being pleasant and not understanding the core issues. And these are the core issues. Now, when people listen and understand, that requires action. Unfortunately, violent action, and we hesitate to do that. The question is time working in our favor? And the answer is no. And we had the wake-up call almost 2 years ago. We thought that we can contain this hatred of Hamas. That was a mistake. So take that as a mini scenario to what may happen in other places around the world as well. Here you go to Dearborn, Michigan. Anybody been there recently? The American police doesn't dare to go in on Fridays because it's a Muslim ex-territory. So the things are happening in other places around the world and not just in the Middle East. And one of the big claims of the Arabs is that Jews have no connection to the land of Israel. Well, this will be a very stupid claim to make, because you know your Bibles. The Bible is full of promises that God makes to his people about the restoration of the nation. Some of you may know that when Jewish people are praying 3 times a day, we pray next year in Jerusalem. Some of you may know that when you enter a Jewish synagogue, the wall that contains the ark, always facing Jerusalem, there was always Jews that lived in the country. So to say that Jews are not connected, it's really pathetic in many ways, but that's the Arab claim. They will say something like, temple on top of Temple Mount, never existed. Maybe a Jebusite altar over there. But Jews were never connected to Palestine. Well, that's ridiculous. But you hear that over and over again. So to say that Jews are not connected, the essence of the Jewish faith, and we are the only ones in that regard, we have a geographical promise. The fulfillment of the prophecies will only take place when the Jewish people are restored back in Jerusalem to restore the nation once again. But what they say is Jews are not connected, and therefore we're not really part of what happens. Read the Quran. Interesting, huh? In the book of the Muslims, what does it say about the land of Israel? They don't like me when I show this. It says very clearly, right? In the Quran, who the land belongs to? Thank you. So that will say, listen, in the Quran is written in a certain way. The first few chapters are written in Mecca, and then the last ones are written in Medina. Sometimes there is a contradiction, and this is one. It's not really, it's there. All right? So even if you want to go to their book and to ask them, all right, what Allah says about the land of Israel, that's what the Quran teaches. They have a hard time to explain that, but it's in the Quran, they can't really change it. So all this was just an introduction to begin to understand what is it that we are dealing with. Are you still with me? Are you okay? All right, let's carry on because we need to set the scene up and speak a little more about the land of Palestine, and we're going back to the 19th century. Let's start with the name. What does Palestine mean? It's not in the Bible. It's not in the New Testament. So where does the name come from? Well, Palestine was a name given to the province of Judea, which was a province of the Roman Empire in the days of Jesus, by the way. And after the Jews rebelled against the Romans, time after time after time, an emperor by the name of Adrian said, I had enough with it. After another Jewish rebellion, he decided he's going to disconnect even the terminology of Jews and Judea. 135 AD was the year. He decided to rename Judea and call it Palestine, named after the Philistines, a nation that the Bible does mention, that came from the islands of the Aegean Sea, Greeks in origin. The Romans and the Greeks were quite connected. So Adrian was the one to name Judea Palestine. In Jewish sources, it never lost the name Judea. It was always Judea. But for the rest of the world, it was known as Palestine. It was not an independent kingdom ever. Palestine was always a district. There was no specific nation called Palestinians, never existed. So the name Palestine basically is a name given by a Roman emperor to a certain area that was inhabited by Jews. Just because he was so upset by the Jews rebelling over and over, he tried even semantically to break any linkage between Jews and Judea. He's going to rename the country. It will be called Palestine. And here is the map of Palestine right in front of you. It's over there. And we are going back now to the map of the Ottoman Empire. That's where our story begins. The 19th century will be the turning point. In order to change everything in the region, I need to zoom out and give a little bit of global history, if that's okay with you. All right, that's the whole purpose here, is education. So the 19th century is typified in one main thing, the weakness of the Ottoman Empire. Palestine is a province in the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottomans, Muslims, all right, are being on a defeat time after time, defeated by Christian powers. And Europe is really freaking out because of one main thing, and that will be the Russian Empire is getting closer and closer to the Mediterranean Sea. That's what the British Navy is ruling. Even today, by the way, Putin conquered Crimea. Some of you may remember in 2014, because Crimea has a very nice harbor. It's over there. And the Russian Navy, if he wants to go down to the Mediterranean Sea, has to have access to the Black Sea and has to have the port, and then through the Bosphorus down to the Dead Sea, because they need to understand that the rest of the harbors of Russia, the water is freezing 6 months out of the year. Russia, a mighty power, cannot use its fleet unless you have hot water harbors. And therefore, even Putin's philosophy was always to try to come closer. He had the 2 harbors in Syria that he lost after the war in Ukraine started not too long ago. That was always a problem. And therefore, the Russians are pressing hard on Turkish territory. The Ottoman Empire is not strong enough to confront Russia all by itself, and therefore the European powers are coming to help. So Turkey is needing the assistance of Britain and France and Prussia and Austro-Hungary, all these names, all Christian superpowers. Turkey is in debt. Not only these countries came to help Ottoman territory, the real problem was to stop Russia. But these countries invested money, lost a lot of people, lost a lot of manpower. Thank you so much. That's what I need. Thank you. The rest is okay. I apologize. Now close your ears or something with the mute, please. Okay? Okay. It's not COVID, I can assure you that. I was here during COVID last time. Sorry about that. All right? So once again, we need to understand that dynamic, all right? The Ottoman Empire is getting weaker and weaker. Muslims, keep in mind, who is coming to help? The Christians. You do understand frustration right away. They cannot make it without the assistance of the Christian superpowers. It's a whole century of Europe knowing that the Ottomans are too weak. They're going to collapse sooner or later. The Sultan was called for decades the sick man of the Bosphorus. The Bosphorus is this. We speak about the straits connecting the Black Sea with the rest of the Mediterranean, and he was the sick man of the Bosphorus. Europe is scared that Russia will have more influence. The whole 19th century was typified by that dynamic. Keep in mind that Palestine is right here. And if the Christian powers are supporting the Ottoman Empire, how can you pay them back? Just as a nice gesture, because there was no money to pay back the investments of the Christian powers. One way to pay back is to give them rights in the holy places in Palestine. That's a holy land, that's Israel. And therefore, the turning point will be the 19th century. Until then, I have to tell you, European countries were not interested in what happened in the area. Those nations went to conquer the world. They crossed the Pacific, the Atlantic Ocean. They discovered the Americas. Palestine was neglected. Nobody cared about Palestine for almost 1,000 years. The world's attention went to the Americas. And suddenly something happens. The Ottomans are about to collapse. It is obvious that it won't take that long, and the European powers are now fighting for the prey. What will be the leftovers, and how can we get more influence? And since we speak about Christian parties, they're interested in holy places in the Holy Land. It gives you a lot of influence. It gives even prestige to say that I am protecting the Christian holy sites among your people and the Christian world. Once again, it was politics using the religious factor, all right, to get more influential. So that would be the typical issue in the 19th century. And it worked. It worked because the Ottomans are able to hold on the front line against Russia, but not without the help of the European powers. And the Ottomans have to, in a way, submit. First, they give permission to European countries to open consulates in Jerusalem. And one after the other, this influence is growing. Now, giving those rights to Christians, keep in mind, dhimmis, slaves of the Muslims, to give them rights in Muslim territory, you do understand how humiliating that is. But the Ottomans did not have a choice. They needed the money. They would be devastated by Russia. Now, this was in the level of the Sultan. Think about the locals. You know what happens when in Jerusalem, suddenly the locals see somebody mounted on a horse who is not a Muslim? They've never seen anything like that before, because only Muslims are permitted to mount on horses. All the others are walking. And suddenly they see a cross on top of building a church? God forbid, that never happened before. You do understand the new approach of the locals in Palestine. For the first time in their lives, they see foreigners, dhimmis, they should treat as slaves, coming as victorious masters. They will never tolerate that, not even today. So keep in mind, when Muslims come to live in places which are not Muslim countries, like Europe, like places in this continent, that's the mindset. For the time being, we're willing to live like equal citizens, but our ultimate goal is to take over so they will be the dhimmis and the Christians will be our slaves, because that's what the Quran teaches. Don't listen to me, listen to what they say, go to the Quran. It's not a hidden agenda. When the Quran says, Dil Muhammad bil Sayf, which means Muhammad's religion will be spreaded by the sword. That's exactly what it means. In the Middle East, it happens on a daily basis. It happens in Europe as we speak as well. So these are things that people need to understand because it happens everywhere. It's very easy to ignore that because if we do understand what's going on, we need to take action. Unfortunately, leaders sometimes are too coward to do that, I'm sorry to say. And that's where we are, unfortunately, in some places. So now a new policy of these capitulations, and those Christian embassies are being built, and they build hospitals, and they build banks, and they build almost like small enclaves of Europe in the very heart of Palestine, which means that people feel more free to come. Because if you have a place like a consulate of Britain, British people will start visiting because now they are protected. They can get decent services. The lives are protected because the Ottomans need the British presence, just Britain as an example. And that opens a whole new era in the history of Palestine. In the 19th century, we have more than 3,000 books and journals and diaries written by Christian Jewish visitors that came to Palestine, and they'll all tell the same story. It was a land very scarcely populated. You can travel for days and hours without seeing a living soul. Where is this peaceful nation that the narrative speaks about? Who lived in Palestine in the 19th century? Very few people. And they will speak about the indigenous people of the land. Now again, that's not my propaganda. You go and check. I'm going to give you some quotes in just a minute. One visitor was Mark Twain. Samuel Clement, 1859, wrote the book about his journey, Innocents Abroad. And he gives us a detailed explanation and description of what he sees. And he said the same thing. Not a tree grows in the area. We don't see a living soul for miles and miles away. Where are the people that supposedly supposed to live here? They were not there. 17th century, 18th century, the population didn't grow. That's not natural. And then in the 19th century, it simply became 10 times more in less than 20 years. What happened? How come? What was the new thing that drew so many people to go into Palestine? A clue? Jewish money that created jobs and opportunities. We'll get to that a little later. So now we have those consulates and those countries are coming. The Turks at first said you cannot wave any flag, but the French embassy decided to wave the flag in 1855, and the Ottomans said, okay, so be it. And then the Vatican actually opened also a consulate in 1847. Everything changes in the 19th century. And since we speak about the new atmosphere, Christians are coming. Think about the Jews for a minute. What an opportunity. For 2,000 years, nearly Jews are praying, longing, yearning to Jerusalem, the Western Wall. It was impossible. Suddenly, there's an opportunity. All the Ottomans care about is money to fill up the empty treasury. And they make the exception or the concession with the Muslim principles. All right, Islam teaches not to sell land to non-Muslims, but we are in the need. By the way, keep in mind, if a Muslim owns land, he is not permitted to sell it to a non-Muslim. If he does, he'll be killed. If you live by Sharia law, once the land is owned by Muslim, it must stay in the hands of a Muslim. If you sell it to a non-Muslim, because everybody has a price. Somebody offered me twice as much. By Sharia law, you did. In Israel, it happened. Muslims are selling the land to Jews sometimes, a private land. If anybody knows about it in the family, it doesn't end well in most cases. And it's not limited geographically. That's what Islam teaches. Go and read, it's in the Quran. So we do understand that there was a big change coming, and the Jews also want to enjoy this new atmosphere. If the Christians can come and buy land in the country, what about the Jews? The Jews should have also the same prerogative. The problem was that the Jews were not ready yet. We'll speak about it in just a minute. So if I'm to point at the main changes, and number two, that led to the whole thing that we can call today the Arab, non-Arab conflict, or the Muslim rest of the world conflict, I will point at these two. Number one, the Crimean War. Some of you may have heard about that. The biggest war of the 19th century, bigger than the wars of Napoleon. We speak about Turkey confronting Russia. All of Europe is helping. By the way, the Red Cross was founded during the Crimean War. All right? Because again, for the first time, somebody noticed how bad is the condition of people injured and wounded, and Florence Nightingale was the lady behind it to start offering medical assistance in the battlefield. Red Cross, that was the circumstances. And once again, Crimea, we spoke about it earlier, that was the war. The Ottomans won the war with the help of Europe, basically. And once again, the Ottomans are in so much debt financially to Europe, they cannot pay it back. They give them the rights to come to the country. Second one will be the opening of the Suez Canal. Suez Canal, a key element in global diplomacy, by the way, was opened in 1869. And this was a great idea. You're cutting through like a little canal here, and that connects Western Europe with the new colonies. If you take the road here, you cut the journey 4,000 miles shorter. You do understand how important will be the canal now for the whole world. By the way, as we speak, the Houthis in Yemen are firing at ships going through here. And the Suez Canal is the main source of income for Egypt. Egypt is devastated because most of the world maritime trade, about 18%, used to go through the canal, not anymore. So those Houthis from Yemen that are firing the ballistic missiles at Israel every now and then are doing much worse damage by blocking the straits here and not letting any ship to go through the Suez Canal. But back then, it was a great blessing. Canal was opened 1869. It's going to change everything because it's very close to Palestine. So Palestine is going to play a key role because you want to protect the canal. You don't protect it right on the banks of the canal. You need some strategic depth, and that will lead you to Palestine. And in the middle of the 19th century, the Crimean War plus Suez Canal brings all the world's attention back to Palestine. For the first time in centuries, Palestine is going to be the center point of attention. And once again, to show you how critical that is, you see the map in front of you. You do see the canal is here. This is the way to India. And Palestine right here, you do understand. You want to protect the canal, you protect it from Palestine. And since the Ottomans are willing to share the land, why not? Everybody now draws its attention to what happens in Palestine. And the Jews are going to enjoy that attention. We'll speak about it in just a minute. Palestine, Eretz Israel, in Hebrew, the land of Israel. Let's speak about the land for a minute. Number one, I'm going to use some quotes that you're going to see. Once again, I apologize. Close your ears for a minute. I promise to be as good as new by Saturday. On Shabbat, usually, we're very healthy. But I'm going to bring some quotes, all right? And if you want to know the source of it, just come and check with me. I'm not making up any of it. It's all coming from reliable sources, but again, you have the right to question that and not to believe anything I'm saying. You go and check, and you go to confirm, and you just make sure that what you heard from me is indeed the truth. That will be the condition in Palestine. We speak about raids of nomadic tribe, the Bedouins. We speak about very few people that live in small impoverished villages, very few cities in this area. We don't speak about any national institutions. People live in a small village, and the next village is your bitter enemy because it belongs to a different clan and tribe, and you have absolutely nothing in common. So where is this peaceful nation, the indigenous people that choose to inhabit Palestine? They never existed, as you see in some of the other testimonies. So the 19th century, we spoke about it. I do want also to add the new law that was made in the Ottoman era, and this will be registering the land, was a new law that was made in 1858. In order to make more money on the land, they decided that every land that was not farmed for 3 years would be confiscated by the authorities, and they're going to sell that to the big money lenders, they're going to sell it to the big bankers, anybody who wants to buy the land. That was a way not to sell it to foreigners, but to keep it in the family. So this was a new reform, and some of the wealthy Arab families were buying huge pieces of land. The problem is, what do you do with it? You just have a big piece of land, usually a swampy area. It doesn't give you any benefits. And therefore, in their distress, they were hoping that their own peasants will be industrious enough to know how to drain the swampy area, to know how to use fertilizers, to know how to do irrigation. There was no motivation from their side to do. Nobody was supporting them. They will lend you money to buy some seeds, and you're going to sow your seed, but if you didn't make a good season next season, you're in debt now. You take your family and you run for your life. It happened constantly. The population wasn't growing. So now you have those wealthy people that have big chunks of land that nobody wants. Who will be the potential customers? Who will pay money to buy this land that was a wasteland? In a few years, the Jews. The land that was purchased by the Jewish agency was the wasteland, was the swamps, the marshes, a land that nobody wanted, because you hear it all the time. The Jews came to steal our land. The Jews know. Land was purchased in astronomical prices, because that was the only way for the Jewish people. An opportunity was there to come back to the country and to start purchasing what we believe is ours to begin with. You do not purchase your own homeland. All right? Again, that's how we see that, but that's what happened. So we speak about something new in the area. Land was offered to Christians and then to Jews as well. The Christians came with one agenda: to redeem the Christian holy sites. So they were not a competition for the locals. The Jewish agenda was different. The Jewish agenda was indeed to buy the land, bring people over, to restore the national issue once again, but not to devastate the others, but to ask them in, to create a nation over there that will include the locals. I'll show you some quotes in just a few minutes. So that will be the new approach now of the people coming back to the land. We spoke about registering the land. I'm going to skip that. In a very short time, what you see in Jerusalem, I'm skipping this one, will be this. Amazing investments, a lot of new buildings, churches, hospitals, consulates, great services. The locals are not enjoying that. If France built a hospital, it wasn't for the locals. It was from French tourists and French visitors. Do you understand the level of envy? The locals never seen such nice buildings in their lives. And suddenly, the Odimi, the Jews and the Christians come to build this, much nicer than anything Islam ever built. And they cannot enjoy that. Do not disregard envy. It's a very powerful incentive. All right? So they see what happens around them. They're not enjoying any of it. The bitterness is growing. And by the way, agreement was between the Ottomans and the British Empire that the British will be the custodians of the Jewish population in Palestine. So Jews are no longer at the mercy of the local Muslims. They are protected now by Great Britain. What a disappointment. I cannot kill this man anymore because it really makes me so annoying, because now he's protected by Great Britain. It changes everything. The whole mindset is changing, and the envy is an important part of it. Look at the list of visitors that came to visit Palestine just in the 19th century. That was unheard before. Nobody came because it was not an interesting place for no. Suddenly, it's a focal point of all world diplomacy because of the Suez Canal, because of the Crimean War, and each one represents people, nation, interests, all on Muslim territory in the land of Palestine. You don't understand how the tension is mounting here. Add to that the Jewish presence, and you've got yourself a whole chaos, what happens in the country. I do want to show you this and just take some time to read at least part of it. Some examples of visitors to Palestine, people that came to visit. Some were clergy, some were diplomats, some were just travelers, and that's their impression. I can give you 3,000 of those, 3,000. They all tell the same story. And it makes you ask, what about the indigenous people that cover the land and these beautiful, prosperous villages and those institutions? They never existed. So just an impression of how the land used to look like. Another one, if I made this one, the Sea of Galilee. Some of you have been there. You know the place. So that will be the situation in Palestine, in Israel, in the 19th century. The Ottomans were not that good in administration, so to speak. But they had one population census taken in 1882. And the numbers of people that lived in Palestine was 141,000. 25% were Jews. Jerusalem had the majority of Jews in it already. So speaking about the indigenous peaceful people, maybe the Jews will qualify. I'm not going back to biblical days. I'm speaking about the 19th century. Because here is the narrative. The land was covered with people, every square inch was cultivated, and these barbarians robbed the land and just killed everybody in Palestine. That's absolutely nonsense. And once again, these are not Jewish sources. We speak about sources that were written by people that were not Jews that came to visit Palestine. And taking advantage of the new situation, a British Jew by the name of Moshe Montefiore was going to the Sultan in Istanbul and said, listen, we have the money. If you're really interested in selling land, give me an official permission so I can buy land on behalf of the Jewish people and bring people back. What do you think was the answer? Sure, why not? If you're willing to pay for it, go ahead. So now it was even legally done, so to speak. There was an official permission given by the Sultan to somebody who represented the Jewish interests, just like the Christian countries. We want to buy land in Palestine. Here is your permit. Go ahead and buy the land. The question is, what land are you going to purchase? What was available? Again, the swamps, the marshes, 95% of the land of Israel was covered with swamps and marshes. A land that nobody wanted. The Christian presence was limited to Christian holy sites. Jerusalem, obviously, Nazareth, Bethlehem, one place on the shores of the Sea of Galilee because the place was not livable back in the days. Malaria, cholera, you name the disease, and that was it. The Jewish agenda was different, to redeem every piece of land possible, because these people came from Europe. They knew how to drain the swamps. They knew how to dig for wells. They knew how to install irrigation systems, and they had the motivation. It was the beginning of the restoration of the nation, not by destroying the others, by redeeming a land that nobody ever wanted. Let's speak about the population. We spoke about the land. Let's speak about the population. Just some images of Jews and Arabs alike. We speak about a mixture of people who lived in the country, mostly in the big cities that were not that big. We speak about Jaffa. We speak about Jerusalem, Nazareth, Hebron, Bethlehem. There were not that many villages or farms because people did not know how to farm the land. The land was not supporting the people. So the biggest blessing to the land was when the Jews will start purchasing stuff in Palestine that will bring the modern era to this country that was still in the very bottom of the Middle Ages, so to speak, or the Dark Ages. It's also important to notice that when those landlords purchased all that land, they brought farmers from outside, from Egypt in most cases. The Egyptians had a reputation. You live by the River Nile, you're a great farmer, plenty of water, let's bring them over to farm the land. So they brought people over. These are not locals. They were brought specifically to farm the land. They brought them from Egypt and from the Caucasus Mountains and the Afghans and Bosnians and you name it. In the survey that the British did in Palestine, people spoke 50 different kinds of languages. 50. And I'm saying that because the world always said Palestine was Arab. No, it was maybe Arabic speaking, but the majority in the land were not Arabs. People that came from different areas of the whole world, most of them brought by the Arab landlords to try to cultivate the land that the local farmers did not have a clue how to do that. And these are considered today the indigenous people of the land. You come over for a season, you make some money, it looks okay, you bring your family over. In a short time, the whole demographics are changing. But these are not the indigenous people. Many came in as illegal workers because there was a need. And nobody cared about who's coming in by the land borders. They only monitored the harbors and who came by the harbors. The Jews and the Christians. And therefore, demographics are going to change as well. That will happen in the days of the British Mandate. For example, there were Germans, Christians coming from Baden-Württemberg in Germany, and they built 5 colonies in the land, the Templars, that was the name, not the Crusader Templars, but another group. There was a ship with 300 people leaving the shores of Maine in America, led by John Adams, not the president, but a reverend by the name of John Adams. They settled down in Jaffa. They held on to the ground for about 10 years, but the conditions were not very easy because the land was covered with swamps and marshes, and they came back home. But we still have the American colony, which is a nice part today, coffee shops, etc., in the very heart of Jaffa in Israel. So the land was open to everybody, including to the Jews. So we speak about the total change in demographics in the area. Well, what would be the Jewish motivation to leave the comfort zone in Europe, for example, and go to Palestine? Number one, that was a national dream for nearly 2,000 years of exile. Now it's possible. For years and years and years, we were longing to Jerusalem, praying for Jerusalem. It was an impossibility. Let's take the advantage of the Ottomans willing to sell the land. So that was the vision of few individuals. It was not a national movement yet, but it's going to be in a very short time. And also in Eastern Europe, in Russia, Jews were treated worse than dogs. So not an opportunity. We can pack the little thing that we have with us and try to pay the money for a visa permit, and we'll go to Palestine because now it's doable. Jews from Yemen, the same thing. People fled from persecution. When the world portrays the Jews as a bunch of brutal colonizers sent by America to conquer the land, absolute nonsense. We'll speak about refugees running for their lives to the only place they could back in the days, and that was the Ottomans willing to sell the land, but it was still an individual enterprise and not a national one. It will become a national goal under the Zionist movement. We'll explain that in a few minutes. Are you still with me? Are you okay following? I'm kind of scanning. I didn't see any closed eyes. My eyes are closing, but maybe one or two. Jet lag, huh? Jet lag. And with age, it's not getting any easier. So make some progress to understand what was the motivation of the Jews, and that's quite understandable. Keep in mind that in Western Europe, Jews were emancipated already. Jews enjoyed almost complete civil rights. In Eastern Europe, under the Tsar in Russia, these guys were oppressed in the worst way possible. And therefore, when the opportunity was there, and people recruited the money to buy land, who will be those pioneers to go over, not from Western Europe? It will be Jews from Russia. That will be the first pioneers in Yemen. The places that suffered from more persecution than any other place in Europe or in the Muslim countries, they'll be the first pioneers. The first ones to come to Palestine to start what will be the state of Israel and the Jewish nation once again will come from places that suffered from this persecution. And here's the information. We speak about Yemen and we speak about Eastern Europe. Just some figures so that you would know what are we talking about. You do see the numbers of people that lived in the country. You see that in the cities, how rapid was the growth in population. All right, so if you come to live in a city, you only have to have some money for the ticket. You'll find some job in the city. But if you buy a piece of land, who will settle there? You just bought a piece of land, and you want people to go and live there as farmers, people to cultivate the land? This profession was forgotten by the Jews because Jews were not permitted to purchase land anywhere in the world. That was one thing the Jews could not have, is to be farmers. Because if you have a piece of land, that will give you a right as a citizen, and God forbid for Jews to have a right as a citizen, for example, voting or be an equal citizen. So in order to be a farmer, you need to study how to do that. The whole nation forgot how to cultivate the land. We became a nation of bankers and lawyers for a reason, right? Because most of the other jobs were not open for the Jewish people anywhere on the planet. The only thing that were open was the money issue, all right? And when you speak about Jews and money, everybody knows that we control the world, right? That's an anti-Semitic remark. It's true, by the way, but I'm just kidding. But you need to understand how we ended up in these professions. Not a story of two grandmothers sitting at the park, and one has the two grandkids, and the other one says, they are adorable. How old are they? She said, the doctor is 3 and the lawyer is 4. Well, that's what happens. If you don't have any other job that you can be engaged in, you become a banker and a lawyer, etc. But now it's an opportunity. If you go to live in a city in Palestine, you'll find a job. But the whole idea was to farm the land, to cultivate the land. People had to be taught how to do that. And in order to do that, they were trained as groups of kids and youngsters in farms in Eastern Europe. And they came over to settle on a swamp, basically. That will be the kibbutz, a farming communal community. The motivation was sky high. It was an opportunity. For the first time in 2000 is finally we can fulfill our dream to be back home without throwing anybody out from the land. We want to create good relationship. It's not stealing from anybody. It's to take land that once upon a time was ours, that nobody wants, and start the whole Jewish way of life and Jewish state once again. That's the way to see that. Arabs in Palestine, as I did mention earlier, the one census that was conducted by the Ottoman Empire, how reliable that was, it will be hard to say. That was the number of people. Within 20 years, the population more than tripled. Now that's not normal. How would it happen that 200 years earlier, the population was steady? It wasn't growing. Well, it happens under one condition only. You're attracted to go to Palestine because something good happened. And what was that good that happened? Jewish money was purchasing land. Jewish communities were built to create opportunities. And from all around the Middle East, people started infiltrating illegal workers to enjoy the prosperity that was created by Jewish money. That's how it happened. Because this rapid growth in population is not normal. And we'll see that in other places as well. So speaking about the indigenous people, people that live there from time immemorial, no, they're not. And you know what? When you talk to people and they're honest, and you ask about the origin of their family name, those names are usually naming the cities they used to come from in other places. Somebody called Al-Masri is from Egypt. Somebody called Halabi is from Syria. So they still have those names that they still carry. That's a family name. And most of those are names of towns from Afghanistan all the way to Morocco. That's where they came from. These are not people that lived on the land from time immemorial, as the narrative says. And once again, please go and check, because I cannot be trusted, because I'm an Israeli, and of course I'm telling you just a bunch of lies, etc. Well, again, just to bring that to conclusion, as the Ottomans noticed that the Jews are coming, and the locals are very unhappy, well, they let the Jews come to purchase land, but they stopped the immigration of Jews legally into Palestine. So people purchased land, they improved the soil, and other people came to enjoy the labors and the money of those people that were not permitted to come in. Eventually, they will take a lot of struggle until that happens. So please read the quote over there, speaking about people that live in the area. And you see the source of it right here, okay? When they say that the land was always, I'm sorry, okay, this one. Palestine was always Arab. That was not the case. We speak about Arab speaking language, all right? You live in Kenya, you speak English. You're not English. You just speak English. The same thing in Palestine. That wasn't that long ago. So that will be the right way to see what happened in the area. And here's a map of the land purchased by the Jewish pioneers before the movement was born, basically. And you see that. It's all the land of the valleys. If some of you know the map of Israel, these are the mountains, the backbone of the country, the heartland of biblical Israel, Judea, Samaria, and Galilee. This was land where the Arab farms used to be. This was private property or Ottoman, not for sale. The land that was for sale was the land of the valleys. That's what the plains of Armageddon, covered by huge swamps, a place that nobody wanted to live in because it wasn't livable. And along the coast, same thing. This was the swampy area that nobody wanted. And guess what? If you're an Arab landlord and you see that the Jews are willing to buy and they will pay any price, you do understand that the level or the amount of real estate was increasing to such a level that the locals, even if they wanted to, couldn't buy that. So you're paying a fortune for a wasteland, but you know how to make it livable. You know how to improve that. So you read those documents of negotiations, and you see that the Arabs do not understand why these idiots, the Jews, are willing to pay that much money for a swamp. Well, because these idiots knew exactly how to drain the swamps, and they knew how to use fertilizers, and how to cultivate the land, and how to create opportunities for thousands to come. So everything was about paying for that, and paying astronomical prices for that. And let me just bring that to you, because David Ben-Gurion, our first prime minister, wrote that document when he came as a young pioneer, right, in 1904. That was the idea. We don't want to take land from the locals. We don't want to create a negative approach with the locals. We are not buying land where the farmers live, so nobody can accuse us that because of us, they lost their job, opportunity. That became to be doctrine and policy. Not in a single case. Land was purchased when the locals had to leave because the Jews purchased land. Everything was done legally. The Ottomans are still there. You cannot steal land from anybody. Now you listen to all those, or you watch on YouTube, it just makes you crazy. Somebody said the professor, by the way, the title professor can be sometimes misleading. You can be a complete idiot, but you still have your PhD, so what you say, everybody believes it. And he said that the locals were so kind to accept the Jews in their homes, and they will go to a vacation. Coming back, the Jews tell them, you cannot go home because now the home is ours. And everybody's sitting like that. What are you, an idiot? People are willing to believe every single thing if the Jews are involved. That's anti-Semitism. And this is not a topic for this session, but we need to understand that. And that's a story. And people buy that. You go to a vacation, you come back, and the Jews say, can't go because now we own the house. In what world these things happen? We speak about the Ottoman Empire, there is law and order. That will be Ben Gurion. And read the words of the Sharif of Mecca, who was the head of the Muslim world back at the days. That's what he says about the opportunities the Jews are bringing to the area. Some of the local Arabs were welcoming the Jewish money and Jewish presence back to Palestine because they knew the land has a potential. The land needs people, creative people that can bring this land back to life. So that's what the Sharif of Mecca, that will be the king of the Arabs, will speak about him in the First World War. So we do speak about this argument as well. Our problem, they will say, is not with the Jewish people, it's the state of Israel. As long as the Jews were not a state, we lived together side by side as great friends. We shared our meals together, we visited each other. Just because of Zionism, state of Israel, the situation is what it became. Well, I'll give you a minute to read what was the true approach of the Arabs vis-a-vis the Jews in the area. That's how much they liked us, and that's how much we had a good partnership, a good friendship. It's absolute nonsense. Jews were massacred, discriminated, disowned from property. That was daily life for the Jews in Arab countries, I'm sorry to say, in Christian countries as well, for quite a long time. Just an example. And read the reports of journalists from the New York Times, not friends of Israel recently, I have to say. So when they say that Jews and Arabs always lived together like good neighbors before the state of Israel, that's absolute nonsense. Even today, by the way, there are no Jews in Arab countries, almost none. There used to be more than 1 million. No Jews in Arab countries. By the constitution of Jordan and Saudi Arabia, you cannot be a Jew. Is that racism or what? How do you call that? We have in Israel 1.5 million Arabs who are Israelis, just like I am. When Mahmoud Abbas was asked, the head of the Palestinian autonomy, in the future Palestine, he said, we will not allow any Jews to live in. Just a minute now. Isn't that racism? What do you mean you will not allow Jews? We accommodate millions of Palestinians or Arabs in our country, and it works perfectly well. And you will not allow a Jew to live in your country? And the world is okay with that. Nobody condemned that in the United Nations. But it's been stated more than once. And if that was not enough, here are some other ideas about the way that the kind neighbors of the Jews were treating them. That was daily life. So next time you hear that, and it's being stated by Arafat in the United Nations in 1974 and by Muslim leaders, we have no problem with the Jews. Our problem is the state of Israel. You read the Charter of Hamas. I'll speak about it on Saturday. You go to the Charter of Hamas in 1988. They speak about killing the Jews, not Israelis, to kill the Jews wherever you find them. And you go to the Quran. Surah number 2, verse 191, it says very clearly, kill them wherever you find them. It's not a recommendation. It's a commandment that was implemented too many times by the Muslim-friendly neighbors. So that will be the approach, and I want to take it to another direction now and speak about the formation of the Zionist movement. Let me try to explain the following. Number one, this will be the flag of the movement, and this will be a suggested one, but this one was, of course, chosen to be the flag and by the state of Israel as well. The Jewish world in the end of the 19th century was different than it was a century earlier. In Western Europe, Jews were fully emancipated. They enjoyed equal rights. They could go to study in universities. They could have political positions. It sounds so trivial, but it wasn't open for Jews for nearly 1,600 years. Now Europe is changing, Western Europe. And Jews are taking full advantage of that. Coming out from the walls of the ghettos, the world is open to them. So many opportunities. And no wonder why they became to be the best students in universities, and they were. So you can graduate to be a great doctor from a university, because now it's your constitutional right, but no Christian business will employ you. You cannot force people to hire a Jewish doctor or a Jewish whatever. You give them rights, but you cannot force a private business. Who are they going to employ, right? That was a great disappointment. On one hand side, people thought, okay, we can be part of the Western civilization. We still are Jewish, but we won't be that obviously Jews. We'll have the usual outfit. We're going to study the local language. We're going to know the local manners. We'll try to be kosher with our food, but besides that, we want to be like everybody else. And now for the locals, there was a problem, because until then, they knew exactly how a Jewish person looks like. And they knew to be away from him because that's how a Jew looks like. Now they look like everybody else. What a conspiracy. We can't even tell who is who. So you do have equal opportunities. But once you're asked in the job interview, sir, are you Jewish? And you said yes, most likely you won't get the job. Now, since you're leaving the old behaviors and traditions and religion behind, there's no way back. So you're disappointed because the old Jewish world that failed you, now you have new opportunities, but you're not really invited by the local society. What else can you do? Fortunately, you can go back to Palestine. The Ottomans are willing to sell the land. For the Jewish world until then, going back to restore the nation was not an option. You need to know that even today, many Jews around the world do not support the state of Israel. Their idea is that when God will bring back the people to the country, it will be over a blink of a second, peacefully, and the new Jewish state should be a theocracy and not a democracy. And since Israel was built, so to speak, or created by war and bloodshed, and there was no peace in the area, many Jewish people will argue that the state of Israel and the movement that created it, Zionism, is wrong. So there was a rift and a breach in the Jewish world until this very day. But those that were trapped in the middle, leaving one world, not accepted by the locals, they were in some kind of a catch. And fortunately, at the very same time, the Ottomans are willing to sell land in Palestine. Somebody had to be a visionary to seize the moment, to say, hey, there's an opportunity. And that somebody was a man by the name of Theodor Herzl, a Jewish person who lived in Vienna, Austria. He was a reporter, a lawyer as well, and he was sent by his newspaper to Paris, France, to cover the trial of a Jewish French army officer by the name of Alfred Dreyfus. He was 1894. Just the fact that I said a Jewish army French officer tells you something about the army is open for Jews as well. That was unheard of for centuries prior to that. But now if the Jews are equal citizens, they should be recruited to the army as well, and one did. And then Dreyfus was accused for treason. And Herzl went there to cover the trial, and he was quite in a shock. Because what he saw, you read the information, I'm not speaking about that necessarily. I told you need to try to follow me or read that, and you choose what is it that you want to do. But Herzl was in the opinion that anti-Semitism is very much there. True, officially, by the constitution of every monarchy in Europe, Jews are equal citizens. But practically, it doesn't happen. And therefore, we have an opportunity. Let's get the people together. Let's build some institutions, buy some land in Palestine, send people over to recreate a Jewish state. Sounds so obvious today, a revolutionary way of thinking in the last years of the 19th century. So Herzl, in order to try to fulfill his views, sent letters to Jewish leaders around the world, asked them to come to a conference. The conference was supposed to take place in Munich, but in Munich, the Jewish community was asking the local authorities, don't let them come together because they're violating Jewish principles. We don't want to create a state. God himself will do that when he pleases. We should not take matters into our own hand. So they moved to Basel in Switzerland. And the 28th of August, 1897, the first Congress got together. They issue on the table to create a movement that will be national, secular, Jewish by that order, to recreate a Jewish state in Palestine. Herzl wrote the book in 1898, and the title was The Jewish State. You see the cover over there. And he writes in his book that within 50 years, there will be a homeland for the Jewish people. Israel was born exactly 50 years later, 1948. So Theodor Herzl is the visionary, the founding father, if you wish, of that movement. And they named themselves the Zionist movement. What is Zion? Well, if you go back to the Bible, Zion is a small part of Jerusalem. The Bible says that David conquered the citadel of Zion. Temple Mount is called Mount Zion. 19 times the Bible speaks about Mount Zion, speaking about Temple Mount. So they took this geographical location in Jerusalem, Zion, and gave it a new meaning. A new meaning which is more political. It will be a Jewish movement which will be national, secular, not giving up the religion, but not being as orthodox as the traditional Judaism. We are going to build a homeland for the Jewish people. The Ottomans are willing to sell the land. Our people are suffering persecution in Eastern Europe. The time had come. Not everybody shared the vision. So Herzl was the one that pioneered a whole movement that will lead to the establishment of the State of Israel. A few people in this room believe that the Jewish people have the right to live as free people in the ancient homeland. You are a Zionist. That's what Zionism means. If you listen to the propaganda against Israel, they said that Zionism speaks about killing the Arabs, speaks about stealing land. You show me one document, just one. You quote to me one speech given by a Jewish leader that speaks about stealing, murdering, robbing. On the contrary, the idea was we're going to go to the land, bring blessing to the land, invite everybody in to enjoy prosperity. You should read the proclamation of our independence. We do want to include everybody in, and then go to read the charter of Hamas or the PLO. Kill, 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 kill. That's the difference between the two. It's not propaganda. The documents are there. You Google and you read the documents. I'm going to quote to you next time sections of the proclamation of our independence. So that will be the beginning of it. And since in Western Europe, Jews still enjoyed some liberties, it was in Western Europe that the movement was founded. But the people that responded were the people from Russia. So land is being purchased. The first national institutions are being built. The JNF to buy land in the country, recruit money from all around the world to purchase land. And then another one to train the people how to be farmers once again, and send them over to cultivate the land at day and protect their lives by night, because the locals were not happy to see how the Jews are coming to this land, and they're so successful in the very same place that the Arabs had failed. They would not understand that. The Jews are dhimmis. The Jews are not supposed to teach us anything. We have the right to kill them anytime we want. That's what the Quran teaches, and that was daily practice for the Jews in our countries until this very day, by the way, in some of them. And that's how Palestine used to look like. As I said a couple of times, there wasn't much in the country back at the days. And let's bring it almost to conclusion in a few minutes. I'm watching the clock over there. I promise to be done on time. So that's going to lead us to one of the key turning points in the whole story, and that will be the Ottoman Empire is going to be devastated after WW1. And a new chapter will start, and that will be the British Mandate that will last 30 years and will change everything. So to bring that to conclusion, we can say the following. The 19th century was a turning point in Palestine's history because of the geopolitical issues of the Ottomans versus the Christian powers of Europe. We spoke about the Crimean War. We spoke about the Suez Canal. Palestine is back on the world's agenda once again. The Jewish movement was just founded. Money is coming in. Land is purchased with permission and encouragement of the Sultan. The Jews are bringing prosperity to the land. And that prosperity spread like wildfire all around the Middle East. Let's go to Palestine. There are job opportunities. Let's go to Palestine. They have decent hospitals. Let's go to Palestine. The roads were fixed. And we speak about a flood of thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people that come to Palestine as illegal workers. If life was good, they bring the families over. It changes the demographics totally. You want to call them the indigenous people of the land? You may, but you will be wrong. Because these people came mostly without any civil rights, by the way. They came for a purpose. They came for a season. Plus, Bedouins, nomadic tribes, that are raiding those towns time after time because the Ottomans couldn't care less about what happens. Until the turning point once again, and that will be WW1. Let's speak about it in just a few minutes, and we'll bring that session one to conclusion. Once again, for the last time, I promise. I'm sorry, been doing this since 2000, first time it happens. I'm getting colds every now and then, but not what I'm sharing. Let's speak about another world event that the US was also part of. And here's the map once again. You see Palestine, this tiny place over there, which is in the hands of the Ottomans. All right, it's on the borders of the Ottoman territory, although Egypt over here, all right, is also still part of the Ottoman Empire, but now it's occupied by the British because Great Britain had purchased the shares of the Suez Canal, as you read earlier, and the way that Britain became an empire was by purchasing something and then send the army to protect their investment. All right, so they sent the army 10 years later to protect the Suez Canal, and that's how Egypt, that was Ottoman territory, was simply conquered by the British Empire, as well as Cyprus, all right, the island here, which is also connected somehow to the canal. So this is still, all right, theoretically part of the Ottoman Empire, but practically occupied by the Egyptian. By the British. As the war begins, Great Britain has a major problem. Most of the British army is invested in France territory. And you know the nature of the war, we speak about trenches, no progress was made, millions were killed, and the British Empire was looking for a breakthrough. And their plan is, since the Ottomans are known to be a very weak empire, so to speak, and Europe is waiting for the opportunity, all right, looking for their demise, and fighting for the leftovers of the Ottoman Empire, including Palestine. Great Britain had an idea. We are going to make an offer to the Arabs that live in the Arabian Peninsula, Saudi Arabia of today. We want them to help us in the war. They can start the war against the Ottomans, and they will help us to win the war in this part of the world. And what made the place so attractive? Not just the canal, the first oil fields. A big incentive. Replacing coal. They just started, all right, mining oil, and they started that in Iraq, Mosul over here. Britain is very interested in having this part. They just don't have the troops. And therefore they try to find some allies in the area, and they make an offer to the Sharif of Mecca. The Muslim ruler who is overseeing Mecca and Medina has a special title. He's the Sharif. Right, this is a title given to the protector of the two holy sites for Islam, Mecca and Medina. Jerusalem is number 3, but Jerusalem is not in the Quran. Jerusalem doesn't appear in the Quran, not even once. So how Islam is connected to Jerusalem? They're not. At least not by what the Quran teaches. We speak about traditions, etc. It's important. Jerusalem is not mentioned in the Quran, not even once. So the Sharif of Mecca is the one who is responsible, all right, for daily life and Hajj, which are those massive pilgrimages to Mecca. That's his title. And the British make him an offer. They start corresponding with the Sharif of Mecca, the governor of Egypt, a British man, Sir Henry McMahon, is sending a letter to the Sharif of Mecca. He said, listen, we need your help. If you're going to help us in the war against the Ottomans, and you're going to present that and that number of troops. Some of you may have seen the movie Lawrence of Arabia, Peter O'Toole. It's a good movie. Although it's Hollywood, good facts. I can really recommend it. 3 hours, all right? But again, it's really a nice documentary. And they try to convince them to help the British. And what do we get in return? Well, the answer is, we'll make you the king of the Arabs. Okay, who are the Arabs? What's his authority? The fact that Great Britain made him a king, who is committed to be under his authority? It's not very clear. The British don't care. We speak about the European mindset. We speak about the British Empire, and they know that they say, everybody obeys. So they make a proposition. If you will help us in the war against the Ottomans, we will make you king. And during the negotiations, they're asking the king, all right, how much of the land you think that you should have as the king of the Arabs? And Hussein says, well, not much. That's the land that I want to have for my future kingdom. Now, this land is important, all right, because this was the very core of Arab territory. We speak about today the lands of Saudi Arabia and Yemen and Qatar and the Emirates, all that. That's what the Sharif of Mecca desires. If you want me to help you in the war, that's what I want in return. And the British say, okay, when the war will be over, if you really help us, that will be a new kingdom of the Arabs. 2 exceptions are made. Palestine is not included. For the British, a Christian nation, which is going to liberate Jerusalem in December 9th of 1917, to hand it over to the Muslims once again was too much. And therefore, we exclude Palestine and the naval base of Aden, which is down here, still a British Navy base until this very day, by the way. That's the deal. They made a deal. If you're helping us, that's what will happen. Well, the problem was that the Sharif of Mecca was very happy to help, but he didn't have that many troops under his command. So he's recruiting some of the local tribes. Lawrence is sent over to take command over them because the Arabs back then did not know anything about modern warfare. They had rifles, but that was it. You don't fight the Ottomans with rifles. Somebody had to supply them, somebody had to teach them, and these were the British. So Lawrence was the man for the mission, and the Arab tribes are marching along the new Hijazi railway all the way to Damascus, and that will be their contribution. All right? That will be the contribution of the Arabs for the success of the British in WW1. Meanwhile, something else happens. The British, and this was a secret agreement, by the way, when Britain made that promise, nobody knew about it. It was something that was made secretly to the Sharif of Mecca, because the Sharif was not a leader by any criteria of the Arabs. And they did not know who will listen to the Sharif. They were hoping to recruit 50,000 people. All right? About 2,000 people showed up. That was it. Not much of a contribution, but the promise was made. At the same time, the British and the French are making an agreement, a secret one that nobody knew about. When the war will be over, and we are going to conquer Ottoman territory, we're going to divide the land into two, between a French territory and between a British territory. The land wasn't even conquered yet. They anticipate the defeat of the Ottoman Empire, and they write a document. By the way, Russia was also part of it. You do remember the Russian Revolution, 1917? They leave the Allies and they publish the secret agreement just to show the world how corrupt are the democracies. They make all kinds of agreements secretly. That was a political gesture. They cannot be trusted. Interesting that Leon Trotsky was the one that published this document that was signed secretly between Great Britain and the French. So that was a way to show them that you cannot really trust the Western powers. And here's a new map, as was agreed by the two. We're going to divide the Middle East into two. Don't try to understand the details over there. It says basically, we're going to mark a line here and a line here. This will be British territory. This will be French territory. There are no French troops in the area, just British. But for some reason, Great Britain decided to divide the land into two. That's how the Middle East is going to look like after the war will be over. Do you see a problem in the map? Well, the problem is that this land was offered to the Sharif of Mecca. It was offered to France as well. The Sharif had no clue about the promise made to France. Needless to say, the French had no clue about the promise made to the Sharif by the British. Do you understand that all hell will break loose after the war will be over? This was typical, if I may say, British diplomacy. And to add to the confusion, the British, using the words of Lord Balfour, the Secretary of State, is issuing a document that will be called the Balfour Declaration. And read it. You can all read it because it's there very clearly. It was addressed to Lord Rothschild, who represented the Zionist movement in Britain, basically. And that's what Britain offers, to build a homeland to the Jews in Palestine. So the same land is offered 3 times. Part of it to the Sharif of Mecca, part of it to France, and part of it to the Jews. Aren't you happy? It's going to lead to total confusion. But it's very important to mention that the Balfour Declaration, as great as it sounds, has 2 main problems. Number one, what is Palestine? Palestine did not have clear borders. Everybody had his own Palestine. It was never a country before. There were no Palestinians. It was a province in the Ottoman Empire. What is the land of Palestine? And how much of Palestine will be allocated for the Jewish homeland? These are the 2 issues on the table until this very day. What is Palestine and how much of it is allocated to the Jewish homeland? There are answers. These answers are going to lead to total chaos after the war will come to an end. And all these treaties will surface. Britain will have to answer to many people, how come you deceived us? How come you cheated? But Britain was the superpower of the world. Who can stand against the Brits? But you don't understand the confusion that's going to follow. But it's important to know that the first time the world agreed that Palestine is the homeland for the Jewish people, because this was embraced by the League of Nations later on, that preceded the United Nations. It became to be a document that the world agrees that Palestine is the homeland of the Jewish people. What about the local Arabs? How come the world did not say it's a homeland for the Palestinian people? Because there was no anything called Palestinian people. Arabs who lived in Palestine, in small towns, in villages, with absolutely nothing to make them a nation. So the world was in the opinion that the Jews in Palestine, not that many, are ready, they have institutions, the land is theirs. The document says, we'll let the Jews return to their homeland. And this will be a document that the world will embrace after the war will come to an end. It's 8:30 sharp, see? So I will discipline, and let's bring, thank you. Let's bring that section to conclusion. I know it's a lot of history, some is boring maybe, but again, if you just zoom into the 21st century and try to explain why Hamas attacked Israel, it's really hard to understand. My purpose is to add the context. And it may be a little long, but if you go from place to place, point to point, it may give you some clarity. Where are we at the present moment? Thank you.